Hello, everybody. We're going to start letting people join us for this webinar. Hope everybody starting to join us is doing very well. My name is Jenny Purdy. I am the director of the Texas Mexico Center, and it is our pleasure today to welcome you to this webinar called Mexico's Gas Market in the Spotlight. It's been a while since we had a webinar on energy, and we're really excited to start talking about energy once again. It is also a great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today. Before I do that, just several reminders. One of them, we will have a chance to address any questions that you might have for the speakers. Make sure you send your questions through the Q&A button that you see below on your screen. And also, if you would like to have a better view of the slides that you'll be seeing today, we recommend doing speaker view. That's going to be the optimal way to see the content. All right. Thanks for joining us. We are excited because today's conversation is going to be great. And I'm going to start by presenting one of our speakers, Adrian Duhalt. Welcome, Adrian. Adrian is, I am very happy to also announce that he is now also a non-resident fellow here at the Texas Mexico Center, our energy fellow. We are delighted. But Adrian is also a research scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. He has obviously a research interest in energy, but also specifically at the intersection of political economy and development and policy issues concerning the energy sector in Mexico, North America, and Latin America. Welcome, Adrian. It's a delight to have you here again. And I'm also delighted to welcome Sergio Chapa. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you here. Hopefully the first of many other times that we'll be able to work with you. Sergio is a senior and LNG analyst for Potent Partners in Houston, where he focuses on projects in the US, Canada, and Latin America. And Texan, he has covered Mexico's energy markets and the global liquefied natural gas industry for nearly a decade as a reporter for the San Antonio Business Journal, the Houston Chronicle, and Bloomberg. And you have an upcoming book. Hopefully you'll get a chance to mention that throughout today's talk. I am going to leave everybody with our experts here. I'll be back when it's time for Q&A, but gentlemen, thank you for joining us and welcome to the center.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. First of all, I want to, it's a great honor to be part of this webinar, but also be part of the Texas Mexico Center as a non-resident fellow. I was just invited a few months ago, and obviously I accepted the invitation. And what I want to do now is to share my screen with some charts I prepare for today's presentation, and let me know if you actually see it properly now. Okay, my name is Adrian Duhalt. I am also at Columbia University at the Center on Global Energy Policy, and what I'm going to talk today about is what I think are the main concerns around the energy sector, well, the natural gas market going forward, and why I believe the outlook for demand in the years to come is like, well, I think the demand is going to go up in the years to come, and I'm going to share some ideas about it. But first, let me start with a kind of reminder, about the important role of Mexico as an export market for the U.S. natural gas industry. I mean, it's been like several years since Mexico became the top export market for the U.S., and that's something that is often underestimated, despite the geopolitical tensions in Europe and everything going on in the rest of the world. Well, Mexico continues to be the largest market for the U.S. natural gas industry. And well, last year, for example, between January and November, we saw Mexico importing record volumes of natural gas from the U.S. mainly. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the volume reached 6.17 billion cubic feet per day. And when we put that into like dollar terms, we find out that, for example, in 2022, thanks to the, to the market volatility, well, the value of imports in Mexico, well, was around 13.7 billion. But with prices coming down in 2023, well, now that value declined to $6.8 billion. Those numbers are from Banxico. And I think this is an important topic. I mean, the fact that Mexico is an important export market, it should be like a reminder of, how things are going on in Mexico in terms of the energy sector in general, because it's not only natural gas, it's also petroleum products, petrochemicals, and so on. So that tells you a lot about the shape of the energy sector in Mexico in general. So my next chart is about, well, this one, sorry. I'm dealing here with some. Well, one of the reasons why Mexico is actually a huge market for the U.S. natural gas industry is because, well, demand has increased substantially over the past years, but also another huge problem is the fact that production hasn't been able to keep up with demand. So we have seen declines at least since 2010. I mean, steady declines in natural gas production. And what you see in the chart is basically the performance of dry natural gas production in Mexico. And as you can see, it's been going down from 3.82 million cubic feet per day to only 2.45 billion cubic feet per day. So that means that Mexico relies heavily on imports, as you know. And well, as in 2023, that percentage is estimated at 71%. And this is like a general facts about the natural gas sector in Mexico. And one of the drivers of that demand is actually power generation. As you know, power generation in Mexico based on gas has play an important, an even more important role year after year. And as we can see here in these charts, around 66% of power generation in Mexico comes from natural gas, and then the percentage was 47% in 2011. So Mexico is heavily betting on natural gas to power our industry, to power our houses, and so on. And in percentage, you can see on the right-hand side of your screen how well gas-based generation has gained momentum or market share in Mexico's gross power generation. The rest of technologies, well, not so much. And well, industry has been well, power generation has been the main driver, but we normally tend to underestimate the role of industry, well, demand from the industrial sector. That has remained kind of flat between 2020 and 2021. That's the latest number I found. But it seems to me that going forward, industry could be one of the main drivers along with power generation in terms of natural gas demand. And that is related to nearshoring, and we're going to talk about it a bit later. And also one of my goals in this presentation is to give a more regional approach to Mexico's demand outlook going forward. And as you know, there is an important project being built at the moment, that is expected to become operational in 2025 and is going to supply more natural gas to the south of Mexico, a region that has normally lacked enough natural gas over the past years. And one of the main, at least in an early stage, once this project becomes operational in 2025, is the petrochemical industry in the south of Veracruz. And it seems to me that one of the early users of that additional supply of natural gas will be the production of fertilizers. If you follow the news around it, a few days ago, probably a couple of weeks ago, and the CEO of Pemex was explaining what the strategy is in terms of fertilizer and ammonia production, which is a value chain that uses natural gas. So it was all over the news that between 2023 and 2020, production of urea, for example, increased significantly. I think it was around 650%. But when you look at what the company plans for 2024, well, the number is even higher, no? Around 0.85 million tons of urea will be produced in 2024. That's 4 times larger than the volume in 2023. But for that, you will require to produce more ammonia. If you're not familiar with it, these facilities are located in the South Veracruz, and they are close to each other. So it's around, the distance between both is like around 30 kilometers. And the point is that the government is also planning to rehabilitate ammonia plants. One plant is producing at the moment. They want to rehabilitate or operate 3 more plants by 2024. And the point is that over the past years, as you can see in the chart on your right-hand side, production of ammonia has declined consistently since 2018, for example, if you looked at this government, but actually since 2000. So that's and the aim is for ammonia production to increase in 2024, 2025 to fit production of urea at Pemex. But the big question is, where is that natural gas going to come from? So my take is that it's going to come from the new supply that is going to come from this project, the Southeast Gateway Pipeline, which is like a strategic alliance between Mexico's state utility CFE and an international company. It's awaiting operations in 2025. So we may see different numbers about these production outlooks of urea and ammonia in 2025. Probably not so much in 2024. But the thing is that is going to be a driver of demand in the south of Mexico. Another driver could be the Interoceanic Corridor. As you know, it's the slimmest stretch of territory between the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific Ocean. And it's one of the main development projects of the current administration. And the idea is to set up around 10 industrial parks, which obviously will need last mile services like natural gas, electricity, water, and be connected to roads and railway lines. But the point is that without natural gas, I think the chances for this development scheme are lower. So if things go as planned and companies start arriving to this region, I think that's going to boost natural gas demand in the long term, actually. Not in 2024, in 2025, as ammonia production or urea production will do, but in the long term. Also, I want to share with you another kind of bottom-up approach about the impact of natural gas at the state level. And that I want to share with you what's going on in the state of Puebla. The state of Puebla in 2017 became the epicenter of manufacturing in all of the south of Veracruz. I mean, the value of manufacturing is way higher than in most states of in southern Veracruz, as you can see on the right hand on the chart on the right hand side. So it's like significant the increase that Puebla has experienced since 2017. And my conclusion is that the construction of a car making plant, a German company, Audi, in 2016 explains this. And I have found some numbers that are gonna let me explain this to you. For example, the company started operations in the state of Puebla in 2016, but in that year, production was very little. The company only produced 18 units in that year, but production actually gained momentum the year after in 2017. It reached 158,000 units. You know, the Q5 SUV is manufactured there. So one of the conditions for Audi to set up the manufacturing plant in Puebla was to have access to natural gas. And obviously, from one year to another, demand increased, and also the value of manufacturing. But when you look at the 4 years before 2016, for example, and then the 4 years after 2017, you will see that a huge increase in demand. For example, between 2013 and 2016, gas demand from industry averaged 76 million cubic feet per day. From 2017 to 2020, when the company actually sustained similar levels of production, well, natural gas consumption in the state increased all the way to 92 million cubic feet per year. So there was a significant increase. So my point is that when a region that Puebla, with all their positive externalities, like, you know, suppliers, specialized labor force, when you combine all this together, well, you get a higher value of manufacturing, and that's the role of natural gas. Natural gas helped Puebla became the epicenter of manufacturing activity in the south of Veracruz. And going forward, what do I see? Well, I think the conditions in Mexico are in place for demand to continue increase, for the country to deepen its dependency on imports, despite the fact that the government has policy tools at its disposal to ease or mitigate the risks associated with this import dependency. But it remains to be seen if the next government is going to use these policy tools. For example, a greater deployment of renewables, natural gas storage are policy tools that, in my view, can help ease the risks associated with those imports coming from the US. You know, that happens to be our main and only, almost only supplier. So in going forward, one of the topics that is going to be discussed heavily in Mexico is actually, well, nearshoring. Well, Mexico recently became the top trading partner of the US, but in the next 3 or 4 years, for example, I found that Morgan Stanley considers that exports could reach more than $600 billion, up from 455 in 2022. So that, I mean, the point is that the potential for Mexico to export a greater, I mean, a much greater value of goods to the US is there, and I think it can be powered by natural gas to some extent, or it's going to be powered by natural gas to some extent. So Banorte concludes that between 2024 and 2028, nearshoring could represent additional profits, close to 160 billion in non-oil exports. So the question is, what's going to power that increase of exports from Mexico? Well, I think one of the options is going to be natural gas. But what are the challenges? Well, I think for me, the main challenge to reap the benefits of nearshoring, increase the deployment of renewables from the government perspective, and also increase production, domestic production of natural gas is actually Pemex, you know, and mostly the financial shape or Petróleos Mexicanos. As you can see in this chart, well, the financial management of the company has been poor. And one of the indicators that show how poor this management has been is, well, the short-term debt that the company, well, has at the moment. If you include financial and suppliers, I mean, the financial debt and debt with suppliers, it amounts to 48 billion as of September of 2023. But if you include other items like taxes, for example, in fact, short-term obligations are around 62 billion. And that means, I mean, as of September, that means that in the next 12 months, that's how much debt or obligations Pemex has to foot. So my point is that the fiscal space for the next government to invest in strategic areas of Pemex or the economy are going to be limited by the heavy burden imposed by Petróleos Mexicanos. And as a conclusion, I would like to say that demand in Mexico of natural gas is going to go up, and that's, well, nearshoring and the outlook of domestic production are not the only factors that are going to shape that perspective. I think Sergio has more to say about it. So with that, I will conclude my participation, and over to you, Sergio.
Okay, thank you, Adrián. I am going to switch over to my slides. Thanks for the presentation. I took a lot of good notes, a lot of good information. I hope they make the slides available to everybody. Lots of good information about the Mexican market. You know, and I want to thank SMU and the Texas Mexico Center for this opportunity. I lived in Dallas about 20 years ago, love the SMU campus, spent a lot of time in Lower Greenville and all the good restaurants off Lover's Lane. So when they asked if I wanted to do this webinar, it was an immediate yes, without hesitation. So, and then, you know, Jennifer mentioned earlier that about the book that we have coming out soon. Yes, I wrote a book called Frontera, A Journey Across the U.S.-Mexico Border, with a dear friend of mine, Guadalupe Correa Cabrera, who's a political science professor at George Mason University. We traveled the entire U.S.-Mexico border, and we wrote a coffee table book with many photos, more than 200-300 photos. There's even an essay by Adrián about the Mexican and U.S. energy markets in there. So that's coming out March 3rd, available for pre-sale on Amazon right now. Frontera, A Journey Across the U.S.-Mexico Border. But, you know, that having been said, I'm here to talk about LNG, and I see a lot of familiar names in the attendees. I just want to thank y'all for tuning in on a Friday afternoon. I always say all the cool kids are in LNG, and I see a lot of people from the LNG industry and adjacent industries in the attendees. So thank you for tuning in. Why don't we get started? You know, they asked me to do you know, to talk about, you know, Mexico's natural gas markets with respect to liquefied natural gas, and I, you know, I agreed. Let's just let me get going here. All right. So I know many of you are already familiar with Poten and Partners, but some of you may not be. And it's Poten and Partners started as a shipbroking firm about 80 years ago or so. We've since diversified our business lines beyond the shipbroking industry. So that's handling all the logistics for tankers, LNG tankers, LPG, oil tankers. But now we have several products. We have a in-house consulting firm that handles questions for clients. And we have this is what I work for, the business intelligence unit, where I'm an analyst and researcher, and we do weekly, semi-weekly, or semi-monthly, I should say, and monthly products about the LNG industry. Okay. But we're all here to talk about Mexico's LNG market. Mexico is a really interesting market for natural gas and LNG, liquefied natural gas. As Adrián said earlier, Mexico is a major importer of natural gas. Most of the natural gas for its domestic needs is imported. Now, that used to be done by LNG import terminals strategically placed along the coast. If you look at this map, just look for those green triangles. Those were the import terminals, which, 3 of those are no longer in major use because they built so many pipelines under the administration of Enrique Peña Nieto, the former president of Mexico, the previous administration, that cross-border pipelines that delivered natural gas to Mexico, that these import terminals were made obsolete. Okay, so let's just do a quick snapshot. Mexico, population of about 126.7 million people. Most of them live in the central Mexico area. If you look at like average energy consumption per person in Mexico, it's about 56 MMBTU per person. That's a natural gas term that stands for million British thermal units. That's a lot lower than the average person in the US, who consumes like around 295 MMBTU of energy. One of those reasons is that, like, because the majority of the population is in central Mexico, the climate is a little more mild. You don't need as much energy for heating and cooling as you would elsewhere in the country. But also, there's less energy consumption. Like, you can look elsewhere in the Latin American market, and a country like Chile, for example, has higher energy consumption than Mexico. And then you compare that to Haiti, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, and it's nearly 3 to 4 MMBTU per person. But anyways, we're here to talk about LNG. And so basically, like I mentioned earlier, there are 4 import terminals in Mexico, with a capacity of 17.9 million tons per year. In the normal natural gas world, they always talk about gas flows being in cubic feet, millions of cubic feet, thousands of cubic feet, billions of cubic feet. But in the LNG world, we talk about it in terms of tons and millions of tons. And so there's import capacity at those 4 terminals, but they're largely unused these days, with the exception of the import terminal in Baja California Sur. The cross-border pipelines have replaced the need for these import terminals elsewhere. We do have, if you look on the map and you see those yellow squares, we have 2 LNG export projects under construction. And I'll get more into those in a minute. And then there's 8 proposed LNG export projects throughout the country, with a combined capacity of 60.8 million tons per year. Okay, so let's just get through it a little bit. I wanted to give you all an update on the construction of the LNG export terminals in Mexico. There are 2. Okay, there's Altamira floating LNG in Tamaulipas, off the coast of Altamira, Tamaulipas, being developed by an American company named New Fortress Energy. There's a capacity of 1.4 million tons per year. It's an offshore project. If you look right here, you can see this modified jackup rig that's being used in the Gulf of Mexico near Altamira to produce LNG. I took this picture with my drone near Corpus Christi, where the work was being done to modify the rig. It's deployed right now in Altamira and undergoing commissioning. Right now, what we're doing here is we're monitoring tanker traffic, waiting for the first tanker to arrive at the offshore platform, and then begin a ship-to-ship transfer for what could become Mexico's first LNG export cargo. And that's big news because Mexico, like we said earlier, is a longtime importer of natural gas. But now there are these projects underway for exports for Mexico to become an exporter of LNG. And yes, these are basically re-exports because you're taking U.S. molecules from the Permian Basin, the Eagle Ford Shale, elsewhere in the United States, and it's going across the border in pipelines to these plants, and then it's being liquefied and then sent out as cargoes. This Altamira project, if the timeline holds, could potentially send out its first cargo by the end of the month, Mexico's first LNG export cargo. That's really exciting news for Mexico. We're told that the Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, is planning to attend the first export cargo, and that would be quite an event to see. And then let's see, there's another project under construction right now, Energía Costa Azul, that's in Baja California, just outside the city of Ensenada. That's being developed by San Diego-based Sempra. That has an export capacity of 3.3 million tons per year. That's a project that's been undergoing. It was an import terminal, and now it's being changed into an export terminal. So it already had storage tanks, and it had a lot of equipment there already. Now they just need to reconfigure the engineering for exports, and that's on target for commercial operations by mid 2025. So the middle of next year should be in full operations. Okay, so on that map that we showed earlier, there were 8 little red squares for proposed projects. And they're at various stages of developments, as you can see in this table. So far, the most advanced is a project called Saguaro Energía LNG in the state of Sonora, and that's being developed by a company named Mexico Pacific Limited, which is headquartered here in Houston. As you can see, that it's 89.3% sold out. Now, the company is targeting to reach an FID later this year. Like all the other projects on this list, though, however, it has been affected by this Biden administration LNG permit pause, and we'll talk about that in a second, okay? Okay, so on January 26th, the Biden administration handed down a pause on export permits for LNG projects. Now, why would this apply to Mexico? So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these projects in Mexico rely on U.S. source natural gas. And because the natural gas they use for these liquefaction projects is from the United States, you need approval from the U.S. Department of Energy to export them. And there are basically 2 types of export permits that the U.S. Department of Energy issues. That's one to free trade agreement nations, FTA nations. So, the United States has free trade agreements like NAFTA with Canada and Mexico. It also has the Central American Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA, with countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, et cetera, et cetera. And it has various others with countries like Singapore and South Korea. But the other permit that you need is what's called a non-FTA permit, a non-free trade agreement export permit. And that allows LNG plant operators to send their cargoes to destinations like Europe or Asia. So like countries like Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Italy, China, Japan, Vietnam, the Philippines, countries where the United States does not have free trade agreements. And why is that important? Because the prices of LNG are higher in those countries. So this is a very sought after permit for LNG exporters. And so when the Biden administration announced this, there was an immediate reaction in the market, a panic almost, about whether or not this would have a chilling effect on developers. Remember, these are projects that have been in the works for more than a decade, and they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on advancing these projects. And all of a sudden, there's a permit pause. There has been some opposition to this in Congress and elsewhere, and through trade associations, and some pushback by the industry itself. Just last week, there was an important update from the Department of Energy that this pause would only apply to new applications or applications under review, and it would not apply to projects that already had them and need extension. So why is that important for these projects in Mexico? If you look at these expiration dates for non-FTA permits for the projects in Mexico, you can see that some of them actually have a generous enough time to complete signing commercial contracts, securing financing, beginning construction, and sending out their first cargo. That deadline, the non-FTA export permit deadline, is the deadline for by when a project needs to send out their first cargo. So there's a small group of projects here, as you can see on your screen, that have an advantage in that they have enough time to make that happen, to sign, to get customers, to get financing, to start construction and send out their first cargo. Some of the other ones, though, however, they'll need extensions, but the Department of Energy issued a statement last week during a Senate committee hearing saying that the projects that need extensions will be able to ask for them and receive them. However, there is a condition. They need to be under construction and demonstrate extenuating circumstances as to why they need this extension. Okay. Okay, so that covers Mexico. One thing you'll notice about all the proposed projects, the majority of them are along the West Coast. Why is that? That's because Asia is the most lucrative market for LNG globally. And putting a project on the west coast of Mexico means that ships don't have to go through the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal right now is facing a drought. There's a lot of bottlenecks and congestions there and long wait times. So a project along the west coast of North America don't need to go through the Panama Canal. They can just proceed directly to Asia. One thing that we're watching and monitoring, and one of the challenges that the Mexican projects face is competition from projects in Canada and Alaska. So you see here on the screen, there are 4 LNG export projects in Canada. And they're all in British Columbia. Ignore what it says up there for LNG Canada. That's in British Columbia. LNG Canada is already 90% complete construction, and its first cargoes are expected out in 2025. The next one up to bat is wood fiber LNG. Early construction started in the fall of last year. They're anticipating substantial completion by 2027. Cedar LNG in British Columbia is what we call pre-FID. That's pre-final investment decision, meaning they're still negotiating the final offtake agreements with their customers. Their goal is to be ready by the end of this quarter and to have secure financing and then begin construction this year. The next one is CUSM. That's another export project in British Columbia. It has a permit pending, but it's already signed its first supply deal in January of this year, and that was a deal with global portfolio player Shell. So, given the permit pause in the United States, a lot of Asian buyers might be giving these projects in Canada and the west coast of Mexico a second look, because these projects, the ones in Canada anyways, the projects in Canada do not require a non-FTA permit because they're using Canadian gas that was sourced in Canada. And then looking at competition for Mexico, perhaps Alaska LNG could be competition. That's what we list as a pre-FID project. It's a project that has all its permits, but is still trying to reach a final investment decision. If you look here, you see that the permits, the in-service date for the construction is May of 2031, and then it has a non-FTA export permit deadline of August 2032. That's a long lead time, one of the longest in the United States. And the reason why regulators gave Alaska LNG a longer deadlines is because of the geographical challenges of the region. You can only do construction during certain times of the year, obviously not during winter. So they gave them more time. And now, amid this Biden administration LNG pause, buyers in Asia might be giving this project a harder look than before. Okay. So speaking of Asian buyers, this is the Potent Partners outlook for LNG demand in the Asia Pacific market, and it's continued to grow. Actually, we expect demand in Southeast Asia, so countries like Vietnam and Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia, we expect that to triple by 2032. We also expect demand from South Asian countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, to also more than double by 2032. That being said, there are some downsides to this Asia Pacific market. Japan is a long-time consumer of LNG, but they're in the middle of, with climate goals, they're in the middle of a switch to renewables and other cleaner forms of energy. There's also a sharp declines expected for LNG demand as more nuclear power plants come back online in Japan. South Asian countries, of course, are price sensitive. And if they have high LNG prices, they've shown that they won't buy. They'll just use coal plants. They'll switch to coal instead. Another challenge for the market is a large number of these nations are embracing renewables. And there will be competition between Asian buyers and European buyers for the next 2 years. Following the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we saw a dramatic increase of imports to Europe, and but we believe that'll continue to grow for at least 2 more years and then plateau because of European nations and their climate goals. It was a fast pivot. They worked quickly to increase the number of import terminals in Europe, and then but we forecast it as plateauing after growth that we'll see in the next couple of years. Okay, so just some final thoughts. I know I wanted to leave time for some questions for Q&A. Just throwing it out there that, you saw a lot of projects in Mexico. Not all of them are going to make it. A lot of them have geographical challenges that include, limited gas from pipelines. As Adrián pointed out earlier, there will be a lot of competition for natural gas in Mexico. There's only maybe perhaps 12 BCF of natural gas pipeline capacity in Mexico. I have it here that the current LNG plants under construction will demand 1 BCF per day of natural gas. Okay, and if only if only a small number of plants get built, perhaps that number will grow to 4 BCF per day. And if all the plants get built, that's 8 BCF per day. And that, with everything going on in Mexico, with like increased demand from nearshoring and increased power plant generation, LNG could face competition in some areas of Mexico. So what we've decided, so not all projects are going to make it. What we're favoring is more of a moderate forecast, where the projects already under construction get built and they're stayed. One large scale project secures customers, obtains financing, gets built, and then at least maybe 2 more mid-scale projects after that. That would make about maybe 30 million tons per year of LNG in Mexico capacity. And what's exciting about that by the end of the decade, Mexico could become the world's fourth largest LNG exporter. And that's going with that kind of medium forecast. LNG exports would begin this year with Altamira. They would grow again next year when Energía Costa Azul comes into effect, and they would grow again once these other projects reach financing. And that's enough to make Mexico kind of leapfrog over Russia, Malaysia, Nigeria. It's literally going from 0 to 60 seconds in a short amount of time. But I'll leave things there. I know that perhaps we have some questions from the audience.
Yes, we'll start taking your questions. Like I mentioned, leave them in the Q&A section at the bottom. And I know, if I may, while people start sending us their questions and warming up, I have several of my own. So I'll take advantage of this time. Several questions, and one of them, I'm going to start with the last thing you mentioned, Sergio. Okay, Mexico could potentially become the world's fourth largest exporter. Now, certainly, I think you can probably tell us that there's a lot of things before that need to happen for that to become true. Can you give us a sense, a little bit more of what are those things that Mexico needs to do in order to make that a reality?
Right. I should have been asterisk. And Adrian knows this too. I mean, I interviewed him for this story when I was at Bloomberg. But basically, for Mexico to become the fourth largest exporter of LNG in the world, you need at least, let me think, 1, 2, 3, at least 3 projects approved, 1 big one and 2 mid-scale projects. So we have 2 under construction. You would need at least 1 large-scale project, to make it, and then you need at least 2 more kind of supporting smaller ones. That kind of production could make Mexico the 4th largest, provided that also that production doesn't grow in these other countries. Russia is sanctioned, so exports there will be limited. Nigeria, they are considering other export projects in Nigeria. So whether or not those make it, or whether you see declines in production in other Nigerian facilities, that also would be a factor. And then same thing for Malaysia. If proposed facilities there come online, or maybe they have declining production at other plants, all that needs to happen for Mexico to become a 4th largest exporter by 2030, 2032.
Okay, we have some incoming questions. The first one is, what is the positive outlook? Better than top 4th? That was, I think it might be related to the what we were just talking about. Mexico becomes the 4th, potentially.
I would say that the no, there's no way. There's a large gap between 3rd place and 4th place, because in the top 3 spots of the world's LNG exporters, you have the United States, Qatar, and Australia. And basically, they kind of seesaw between each other at 80 or 90, and soon to be 100 MTPA, million tons of LNG per year. And so you have these guys fighting it out in the 90s and the hundreds of millions of tons per year. And then the 4th place is kind of like in the 30 kind of 20s range. So yeah, there's no way. That would be a lot of projects. There's not even that many proposed projects in Mexico to go above 4th place.
So Sergio, I have a question for you. If these 3 projects get the green light, will Mexico need more transport capacity? Because I think that's one of the main challenges of these projects. So, I mean, despite the fact that it's going to be only 3 projects,
right?
Will Mexico need more pipelines?
Oh, no, that's a really important question, and the answer is yes, actually. Depending on which projects reach FID, secure customers reach FID. Some of them are actually well advantaged. Like they're at the terminus of various pipelines, the existing pipelines that have extra capacity. So those projects aren't gonna have any problems. But those are the smaller ones usually, you know. But some of the large scale projects, however, and I think there's two proposed, they'll need secondary pipelines built. You did see with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission yesterday
Yeah.
gave a presidential permit and approved the Saguaro pipeline being proposed by ONEOK in Oklahoma that would go from the Waha hub to the Mexican border with the intention of supplying West Coast Mexican LNG projects. You know, ONEOK still needs to reach FID on that project. And then you also need to reach FID on the Mexican side for another pipeline. So, you know, there's still a lot of asterisks there too. I don't think that ONEOK would. A lot of people say that the Mexican projects would need to reach FID first before the U.S. project would, but we'll see about that. You never know. That's an uncertainty, but definitely for these large scale projects, you are going to need additional pipeline capacity.
So, but what you are saying is that you will need additional pipeline capacity on both sides of the border.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. I would say about maybe 2 to 3 BCF.
Here's another question from our audience. What are the chances for Mexico to meaningfully increase domestic production to offset some of their supply needs?
Well, I can give my opinion about it, but it seems to me that, well, Pemex itself is in a very difficult condition to increase production in the following years. Well, first because of the huge debt that is going to put a dent on every project or major project the company wants to push forward. You know, I think the financial capacity of the company is going to be constrained by this huge debt. So yeah, that's the main issue here. And also, when you look at capital expenditure in exploration and production, if I am not mistaken, in 2024 it was going to be lower than it was in previous years. So, and I will not be surprised if capital expenditure continues to be like, you know, declining, thanks about amid this context of the financial problems of the company.
Right. And I'd like to add to that. There are a small number of exploration and production companies in Mexico, privately held, you know, non-Pemex exploration and production companies in Mexico. And they would love nothing more than to grow domestic production. But there are challenges, you know, pipeline capacity, whether they can secure it to get their product to market. Some of them, a lot of these E&P companies in Mexico, what they're considering is using like what we call small scale LNG, or like CNG, compressed natural gas. So what you do is you have a wellhead out in the middle of a remote area of Mexico, and then you tie it to a plant where you can compress the gas or liquefy it and put it on a tanker truck and then deliver it to other customers in other ways. You could see that, but I don't think that it would be a very significant number. Like what Adrian said earlier was so important, and such a huge volume of gas. We're talking like importing 6 billion cubic feet per day. This wouldn't move that needle very much, but it would still, you know, ease the pressure valve a little bit, especially for, you know, customers who aren't connected to pipelines. Like let's say like gold, you know, literally gold mines or silver mines or lithium mines or maybe, you know, manufacturing plants that are part of this nearshoring phenomenon. I think you could see that happening, but not per se on a BCF, billion cubic feet per day scale that would move the needle. I know that the state of Tamaulipas is considering a storage project, you know, which is much needed in Mexico. There's not any storage in Mexico. I know Adrián could probably speak to this better, but you know, it would hold about 30 days worth of gas for the entire state in this project, or maybe 2 or 3 days worth of gas for the entire nation. you know, and so it's not only growing domestic supplies, but also growing domestic storage capacity in Mexico. That's something that needs to happen.
Speaking of storage, our next question asks that, are there any energy issues in Mexico that face significant political risk with the election? And does Mexico have any plans to build domestic storage?
Well, I don't see that happening anytime soon. I mean, with this government, and that's a very good question, because under this government, I think as never before, the conversation around energy is it's been having a political approach. So the discussion is not about the economics of the energy industry, but also about the political economy around the energy industry. And as we know, well, this government has embraced a more nationalistic approach. That may change under the next government, but that remains to be seen, because at the moment it's not clear what's the stance of at least the candidate that is leading in the polls. If she becomes president, I think not that much is going to change in the realm of energy, but well, and as for the outlook of natural gas, I think in the short term or medium term, I don't see any major change. As for the storage policy, well, as I said in my presentation, it's one of the policy tools that the government can use, but the policies that were designed under the previous administration were put on hold under this one. So I think that's important to say, and it remains to be seen if the next government is going to use this policy tool, I mean, storage, and to actually ease the risk associated with import dependency. But that remains to be seen.
Right. You know, it is interesting that, you know, you could use LNG import terminals as storage. In theory, maybe these legacy import terminals could be used, and they have been in emergencies, like weather emergencies, like freezes in the United States, where, you know, you saw the deliveries of cargoes to Mexico. You could hold that LNG, the liquid, in the tanks, and then just ration it out as the rest of the Mexican grid needs it. But no, I agree with Adrian 100%. Storage is an issue that an urgent issue for Mexico.
I think we just have time for maybe one more question. And if in the audience, if you have further questions, leave it in the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to forward to our speakers today, even after the project. Also, you can find them on Twitter. So if you want to reach out there, or now known as X, feel free to reach out to them there also to continue a conversation. Last question we have time for. Does sending natural gas by pipeline to Mexico for processing to LNG to be re-exported go around the Biden permit pause, do you think?
No, no, it does not. No. Because you're crossing the border. Those are U.S. molecules. You send it to an LNG plant in Mexico, liquefy it, export it. Those are U.S. molecules, and they will need to be covered. They will need a non-FTA export permit. You can't do that. In fact, one of the quirky things about the Altamira project from New Fortress Energy is that they're still pending. They still have a pending request for a non-FTA permit, and they haven't gotten it. So, however, they do hold a permit to export to free trade agreement nations. So they can export to the opposite coast of Mexico if they want. They can export to LNG importers such as Colombia, El Salvador, Nicaragua. Well, I mean, the import terminal in Nicaragua isn't ready yet, but when it is, in theory, they could send it there. They could send it to South Korea or Singapore. but actually the first cargo will most likely go to Puerto Rico. New Fortress Energy sent out a press release saying that they got a waiver, a Jones Act waiver or permission or clarification from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection that cargoes from Altamira can be sent to Puerto Rico. As you may recall, that Mexico is part of NAFTA, now USMCA. So cargoes there from Altamira can be sent to Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, without any legal problems. But the pause definitely applies to LNG export projects in Mexico, particularly those that re-export U.S. molecules. Now, if you have a LNG export project in Mexico that uses 100% sourced Mexican domestic natural gas, you don't need that. You're fine. But the problem is there's only a couple projects that are in that category. Otherwise, if you haven't already applied for your non-FTA permit and you're looking for an extension, well, you've got to be under construction and face extenuating circumstances. So.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic talk. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who joined us today, and please join us next time. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Sergio. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you at our next event.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody,
Bye-bye.
for tuning in. Bye-bye.